Hey guys, it's Sam Stein here with the Bulwark. I am joined by a special guest today, Adam Wren, political reporter at Politico, who I used to have the pleasure of editing. Adam and I are going to discuss what I think is just an incredible piece of journalism that he produced this morning. I know it took forever because I signed it. I signed it several months ago. How long ago did I sign this piece?
December.
December. Okay, yeah. I signed this piece in December before I left Politico about Mike Davis. Mike Davis may not be a name that's familiar to a lot of you watching, but it should be. And that's why I asked Adam to do this piece. I'm going to just sort of tee it up for Adam. Why should Mike Davis be a name that people know about?
Well, there are a number of reasons, Sam. I mean, first of all, he was a key figure in getting much of the Trump conservative Supreme Court majority confirmed. He worked as an outside advisor to Neil Gorsuch, for whom he clerked on the 10th Circuit in Colorado, and essentially got his confirmation done. He confirmed Amy Coney Barrett to a lower court before she ascended to the Supreme Court, and he also led the confirmation for Chuck Grassley of Brett Kavanaugh, which was a very heated, obviously cultural moment.
Memorable,
Yeah,
memorably heated.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that moment, he really wasn't as excited about Brett Kavanaugh as he was Neil Gorsuch, because he had a personal relationship with Gorsuch. But when the Christine Blasey Ford allegations surfaced in the way they did, that really radicalized him. And so we started this Article 3 project designed at making the judiciary more conservative, and has helped confirm 278 justices across the country since then. And now he's being looked at as someone who could be the next Attorney General of the United States, if not that, Chief of Staff at the Department of Justice. And at a bare minimum, someone who talks to Donald Trump regularly and has really kind of quarterbacked a lot of his legal defense, whether it's in the Supreme Court immunity case in Florida, the documents case, or in the Manhattan case. There's scenes in this story where Mike Davis will get up to go take a really important call, and
Yeah.
all of those ended up being times that
Well,
aligned.
we'll get to that. But I basically, long and short of it is, this guy is among a short list of people who's going to be a major player if Trump gets back in power, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Possibly Attorney General nominee or Chief of Staff at the Justice Department.
That's right. Yeah, significant
Yeah.
figure who has Trump's ear.
Now, what I thought was interesting about Mike Davis, in which is conveyed in your piece, is that few people kind of straddle a line or have been able to straddle a line between establishment Republican politics and MAGA politics. He's done it. How has he done it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. He's really good at code switching. So when he's with people like Chuck Grassley or Mitch McConnell, he, talks about, his status as a Federalist Society, rank and file Republican, someone who organized George W. Bush college Republicans at the University of Iowa, and then all across the state of Iowa, a Bush Republican who worked in the Bush DOJ, HHS, and he has all of those connections still, and keeps in touch with Gorsuch. But at the same time, ever since the raid at Mar-a-Lago, he got on Steve Bannon's radar and would do Steve Bannon's War Room podcast and YouTube show, and really ingratiated himself to the far right of the party, talking about the lawfare against Donald Trump. And so
Yeah.
over the last couple of years, he's really become kind of someone who has a foot in both worlds, the establishment and the Bannon wing of the party.
There's a quote in here from associated with him that I just sort of jumped out at me. Quote, I think he's less of an ideologue and he's more of someone who just wants to throw bombs. Talk to us about some of the extreme things that he has proposed doing that we'll get to this in a little bit, that he says maybe is just hyperbole, but he's suggested some fairly extraordinary moves for Trump if Trump were to get a second term in office. What are they?
Yeah, Sam, I think this is what landed him on both of our radars. He went on the Benny Johnson show last year and infamously said that he wanted to put kids in cages, put journalists and political opponents in gulags, and rain hell on Washington, D.C. as acting attorney general for Trump in the first 3 weeks.
Is rain hell a quote?
Yes, rain hell is a quote. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a direct quote from Mike Davis. Rain hell on Washington, D.C. and the Democratic Party. And this is something that has landed him on the Biden and then the Kamala Harris campaign's radar. They've sort of pushed out his radical statements here. He, of course, says he's trolling, but really, as I reported this profile, one of my takeaways is that the line in the Trump era of the party between
Right.
trolling and truth telling has become so thin. It's hard to understand whether or not Davis really means these things.
We should note at this point that among the people he has suggested he would put in a gulag are two people associated with the Bulwark, George Conway and Tim Miller. How does he rationalize that?
He says that he is saying these radical things to show Democrats the risks of political prosecution of Trump, which we can question whether that's fair or not. But he is trying to show, in his mind,
So it's theater.
Yeah, it's theater. Yeah, he's doing prop theater. He's doing agitprop, really political agitprop. And I think that it's sort of a dangerous game to play. And he is ultimately concerned, I think, about getting Project 2025, whether the Trump campaign is going to look at him as a political liability ultimately and sort of sever ties.
Does he feel like he might have gone too far and that the Trump people are going to say we can't be associated with this guy anymore?
He did tell me about this kids in cages moment, that it was a, quote, self-inflicted wound. And so there does seem to be some cognizance, some self-awareness here that even if he was joking, even if we take him at his word and assume positive intent here, that he's gone too far with this comment.
It's funny. I wonder when the sort of self-awareness breaks down, right? Like, you live in this world in which you're rewarded for saying outlandish extremist things like, I'm going to put kids in cages and throw journalists in gulags. And then suddenly, at some point, you wake up to a reality in which that's a liability.
Yeah.
And is he even aware of where that line is?
I don't think he is. I think for him, the line is evolving and dematerializing, rematerializing. He's kind of lost in a series of funhouse mirrors, it appears to me at times. And what's remarkable is that he has been rewarded for his work on the Trump campaign. You actually reported earlier this year that the Article 3 Project, which is the nonprofit that he has spearheaded, received $150,000 from the cash-strapped political action committee of the Trump campaign. And, they're aware of him. He's on their radar. And Donald Trump Jr. In particular, who was largely involved in making sure J.D. Vance was the vice president, likes Mick Davis and really genuinely wants to see him, no troll or not, play some sort of a role, even if it's an informal one. And
how serious? I guess my question is, and I was hoping, your piece does get to it, but there's still some uncertainty around the question of how serious is it that he will play a role, and what role would it be? I mean, they float the idea that he might be attorney general, but then he dismisses it, saying he'd have to have 100 senators to get him confirmed. I mean, what's your reporting tell you on how honestly they are considering him for a role and how likely he would take it and what it would be?
They are 100% serious about having him involved in a second Trump administration. Matter of fact, there's some talk on the Hill that if they could get some kind of 52 seats in the Senate, that he might be confirmable
As AG.
As AG, yeah. And there is a serious interest from Donald Trump himself and others, according to my reporting, in having him fill some kind of an official role. Now, the lack of seriousness comes from Davis himself. He's not independently wealthy. He grew up to 2 school teachers in Iowa. He has a private law firm operating in the background. He spent a lot of his own wealth getting Article 3 off the ground, and so he has other interest financially that he wants to nurture and take care of. And so whether he'd go back and do a Donald Trump stint again is, I think, not something he's like pining for. But
right.
You know how this works, where if Trump should win and the president of the United States asks do something for a limited period of time, the calculations,
He's also not too old. He's 46 years old. I mean, it's a
yeah,
4-year stint. It's not
yeah.
like life ends at that. Is there anything in your time with him? You spent an extensive amount of time with him. Is there anything in your time with him that would suggest he would be independent at all from a President Trump if he were to somehow end up in a high-ranking level position at DOJ, if not AG itself?
Yeah, I pressed him on this in particular about what he thought of the family separation policy
Right.
instituted in the Trump era, and related to kids in cages. And he did somewhat surprisingly blanch on that question and seemed to indicate that. He sort of pointed fingers at the Biden-Harris administration, the Obama administration for their approach to immigration and losing track of migrant children. But he acknowledged that Trump wanted to reunify families in his second Trump administration. So to me, even though he wasn't fully candid about that, I read that as a tacit acknowledgement that this was a disastrous policy that hurt a lot of families and hurt a lot of people and was broadly unpopular, even with people like Melania Trump at the time. And so there did seem to be
Yeah, but that's like a political calculation. I'm kind of curious if he would be at all independent in thought from Trump and say, look, what you're suggesting is not legal, or some sort of bulwark, to borrow a term, against the president in a way that even Jeff Sessions was.
He is at core, I think, an institutionalist and someone who puts a lot.
You came away with that idea that he is at his core still an institutionalist.
At least as it relates to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court seems to be the defining institution for him, and he said that he wants to use the Supreme Court to dismantle most of the federal government. I mean, this is someone who came to Washington, D.C. as an intern for Newt Gingrich, and he's very still much invested in the Newt Gingrich project. So he respects the institution of the Supreme Court, but his vision of it and the way that he's refashioned it in a very Trump-friendly way does raise questions about his independence.
Let's end on sort of where you end in your piece. A very chilling anecdote. I'm just going to set it up for you. You're at the RNC convention. You're in a hotel with the grand poobahs of the party, where the Trump team is sort of having their victory celebration. You're there with Davis, kind of shadowing him as a reporter does, at his behest. Don Jr. is there. Some other luminaries are there. Paint a picture of what happens next.
Yeah, so this is on the 9th floor of the Trade Hotel, and Davis had just come off the convention floor after Trump's final speech, and I just wanted to see how he was received in a room like this, and he was received like a conquering hero. I mean, he is popular among all of these people, and he went over and talked to Donald Trump Jr., and I sort of trailed him. Wanted to get a fresh quote from Donald Trump Jr. I had a paper statement at that point, but wanted to actually talk to Donald Trump Jr. And this man and woman beside Donald Trump Jr. drinking with him at the bar, started eyeing me. I had my yellow media lanyard on. And this woman came over as I was with Davis later and sort of accosted me for staring too much at the Trump family. And then as Donald Trump Jr. exited the bar near closing time, she came over and noticed that I was taking, notes on my interaction on my iPhone, and I heard Donald Trump Jr. essentially ask Davis to be his attorney general. And Davis said he would give Trump 3 weeks as viceroy. And this woman, was frustrated that I was chronicling this scene. And so essentially she confronted me, demanded that I delete my notes, which obviously I saw all this play out, so it wasn't going to delete from my mind. So that was sort of curious. And obviously I refused to delete my notes. I tried to exit the building, go to the elevator and leave. She actually recruited four men to block my egress from the building, and had a standoff for 15 minutes or so. I said, I really need to get to the airport here eventually to go home and see my family. And she said, you should have considered.
What are you doing just where are you in this standoff?
So I am outside of a very tiny bar on the 9th floor of a hotel outside bank of elevators. There's sort of a restaurant to my left, and
And they're
about
just not letting you get on the elevator?
no, they're refusing. I didn't want to engage physically and sort of push past them to initiate physical contact, and so they're not allowing me to get on to the elevator to leave until I either give them my phone or delete my notes. I think in retrospect I could have pretended to delete my notes, but I didn't want to give them that.
And you call Mike
Yeah, I
at some
called
point.
Mike and said, Mike, they're not letting me leave. He had disappeared. Didn't know where he went at the moment. Can you come and help me? They're not letting me leave. And so, after that call, things were getting pretty tense. And I read the woman's threat about I should have considered, documenting the exchange before. I should have considered my kids before doing that. I read that as a veiled threat of some kind. So I kind of looked to my left and noticed that there was an exit, and made a bolt for the exit. I couldn't get out on each floor. Couldn't get into the lobby.
Did you literally run?
Yeah, I literally ran, and I could hear at the top of the staircase, the woman yelling and what sounded like a man behind her. I would later learn that they had threatened to call Secret Service on me, and from a colleague who would relay that anecdote. And I ran down about nine flights of stairs and
Were they chasing after you?
They came the first two floors, and I think they sort of gave up after that. And when I got to the bottom floor to go into the lobby, I didn't have a key card, so I couldn't do that. And noticed kind of around the corner an exit onto the street, and so I went out onto the street. And walked towards the Uber zone. And as soon as I got out, I called my editor, David Siders, woke him up at 3-4 a.m. And stayed on the phone with him until I got into an Uber. But yeah, it sort of shook me. And Davis had at that point, as I was leaving, come down. And I would later find out, dressed down this woman and said, this is not North Korea. You don't ask a reporter to delete their notes. And he continued to kind of call in and check on me. He called the Trump campaign and relayed to them what had happened, and was very, I think, shocked by it as well, he says in the piece. And at that moment, I didn't really want to write this scene. It was sort of, I wouldn't go so far to say traumatic, but it shook me up a little bit in the moment. And I didn't really want to write the scene. But when I learned how Davis reacted to it, it really helped clarify a little bit about him, at least, and that there is the vestiges of that traditional republicanism in him, and that he does, despite saying he's going to send journalists to the gulag, he does have a reaction against that. And so I think the piece kind of captures him in mid-stride in the transformation from, a traditional Republican, as Bannon says, to what Bannon says is a, quote, full fucking MAGA warrior.
Did you ever find out who the woman was, or the four men?
I did find out who the woman was, and for editorial reasons, we decided not to name this person. She identified herself as an aide to Kimberly Guilfoyle, as an employee to Kimberly Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr.'s fiance. We did talk to a spokesperson working on behalf of Kimberly Guilfoyle, who denied that this woman was an employee of hers. And so ultimately, this was a story about Mike Davis, and we decided editorially to not name this woman.
Does Mike Davis, if we'll keep it on Mike Davis then, and maybe this is a good concluding question, but does Mike Davis recognize that this is kind of Frankenstein's monster? He's Frankenstein, and that he unleashed this type of behavior?
I think he does, to some extent. I don't think he's fully grappled with it, and I don't think he's fully grappled with where it's headed. Later in the process of reporting this piece, I was surprised to see him reshare, cat eating memes from Springfield, Ohio, and also, reshare on X memes about Kamala Harris using AI to generate false crowds at her rallies. as much as I had come to know Davis, those two particular things surprised me and seemed dissonant with, who I understood this person to be. And I've told him that before this piece runs, and he sort of tries to reconcile with that in the piece. We have a disagreement. I've spent time on the ground in Springfield, Ohio, and have not found evidence of this unfounded claim. And so I think that I think that he has truly been radicalized in some sense. He says it dates back to the Kavanaugh hearings, but I do think there's sort of a negative polarization here, where he feels he's responding in proportion to Democrats' politicization, and that just doesn't seem to be leading to a healthy place for either party.
Well, I'll leave with this quote that I thought was the most, maybe not chilling, but I think it exemplified what the piece was all about. You asked him, what is the line in the modern day Republican Party between trolling and legislating? And his response is, whatever you can get past. So the breakdown of that line is real. Adam, my man, I knew it would come together. It took too long. It just took too long. That's all.
It did.
It's all right. Some things are worth the wait. I applaud you for a tremendous piece of journalism. I think it's one of the definitive pieces on what a Trump presidency would look like, and one of the more important operatives who's underexplored. The piece is at Politico. It's called Trump's Legal Bulldog and Possible Attorney General Says He's Just Trolling All of Us. Adam Wren, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you guys for watching on The Bulwark. As always, please do subscribe to our YouTube page. My man, appreciate you.
Always good to see you, Sam.
Take care.